bless you, everyone, and welcome back to part 2, talking about Joseph. So the last time we spoke about how Joseph's actions could have provoked his brothers and and how God had him on a track, not just of self-improvement, but of development in order that he could fulfill the purpose and the destiny on his life. You see, it's a fact that with the wrong attitude and the wrong outlook, that can often lead to God not being able to use us. And if there's anything that we should be concerned about, is that God can use us. Because that's the whole and entire reason why we're here on planet Earth. So we see that Joseph has now been in Potiphar's house for a while. He's gone through the temptation of Potiphar's wife, and Potiphar comes home and his wife tells the story and produces the evidence of the jacket. Oh! And I can see that Potiphar was heartbroken, because he's thinking, where am I going to find another man to work for me like Joseph has worked for me? You know, he wasn't thinking, oh my goodness, where am I going to find another wife or whatever? That's my take anyway. Just humor me, okay? But I think he was heartbroken when he had to throw Joseph into the prison. And I think Joseph too might have been mystified as to why his circumstances changed so much when he had done nothing to merit it. And often, we'll find ourselves asking, why me? Why now? Why am I going through this? Why has this happened? I've tried to walk in integrity before God. I've done the best I can. Why am I going through this kind of adversity? But you see, God cares about our circumstances, but He cares more about us fulfilling our purpose and destiny than He does about our comfort. Because comfort can kill you. And so Joseph gets moved from the house of Potiphar into the prison, but not just a normal prison. Like nowadays we've got nice prisons with en-suites and TVs and even access to the internet. Joseph was in a prison within a prison. He was in a dungeon. It was dark. There was no fresh air. The smell must have been terrible, because I'm sure they didn't have any en-suite bathrooms. But when God's hand is on your life, it won't be long before you begin to distinguish yourself. And the thing about this, Joseph wasn't in prison for a couple of months, and got early parole. He was in prison for quite a few years. But even in that set of circumstances, he did not allow himself to become discouraged. I think the tenacity that God placed in him allowed him to serve others. And the thing is, we need to remember that it's not like Joseph had a preview and he knew that, oh, God's going to take me out of here and put me in the second place in the kingdom. No, he didn't know that. And that's, I think, one of the things that I do love about Joseph, the fact that he worked blind and he kept faith. And so we see that he's in the prison. He interprets dreams for a couple of guys who work for the king. And then one day, after many years of hoping that they were going to remember him, the call comes. Bring Joseph. And he's rushed to have a bath, and he's rushed to get the best clothes that they could find for him. Hairdo, a shave. Well, I don't know, maybe they didn't have a shave. Anyway, that's beside the point. And Joseph appears before Pharaoh. By this time, his character and his outlook had been so rounded and grown so much that he realized he wasn't representing himself. And he knew that he could not interpret the dream, but he declared to Pharaoh that his God would give the interpretation. And so said, So done. Pharaoh shares the dream, and Joseph explains to him, yeah, the fat cows have been eaten by the skinny, emaciated cows. And he interprets the dream and tells him about the plenty that was coming, and then the drought and the scarcity that would follow that. And he says to the king, you need to get a man who can make some plans and logistically help you out so that you can endure the hard time that's coming. And so through Pharaoh's mouth, God gives Joseph a reference. And he says, I don't think I can find a better man than you. Excuse the paraphrase. But I don't think there's a better man for the job than you. So what is this telling us today? It's telling me personally that we need to endure the test, the trials, and not just endure them, but go through them with the right attitude, with a good spirit. Because no matter where we are, in a prison, in a dungeon, in a palace, our lives are in God's hands. And He's able to do what He wants to do in our lives, if we would just let Him. And so we see that Joseph is transformed from an arrogant young man, a young man who is full of his own importance, who glides on the back of his father's authority, to a young man who is humble, who is obedient, who is efficient in what he does, somebody who is tuned in to hear the voice of God, and so now becomes so eminently usable and useful to God. Maybe that's what God is trying to do in your life and in my life, to bring us into a place where we lean not to our own understanding, but we acknowledge Him in all of His ways, and thus He's able to direct our paths and bring about the expected outcome that He has for our lives, for us as an individual and for us as a people. Because Joseph did not just save the people in the palace, he saved the entire nation and also the nations that surrounded Egypt. God wants to use your life not only to impact your house or your neighbor's house, but He has given us the ability to impact a nation. What has God called you to do? Allow Him to work on your personality, your character, your obedience, so that we can be useful in His hands. May God bless you today, and see you next time on The Pastor Speaks.